Hey everybody, I think we're live here on Monday. Hope everybody had a good weekend. I'm just going to check and make sure that everything is on here. All right, and we are a go. Okay guys, so hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope everybody is staying home and staying safe, staying healthy. Today I'm going to talk about the 5 keys to success when it comes to health and wellness. How to make changes in your behavior, how to manage those changes and maintain those changes. Hi Denise, how are you? Let me make sure I got the comments on here so I can see people when they're coming in. Denise, good, nice to see you. So I'm going to talk about the 5 keys to success. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Step 1, and the number 1 key to success is understanding evolutionary mismatch. Now, I talked about this last week, but it's really important to understand. Evolutionary mismatch explains how, as a species, we evolved over the span of millions of years in an environment of scarcity and food unpredictability. And over that span of time, we developed traits and characteristics that enabled us to cope with conditions of scarcity and conditions of unpredictability when it comes to food. Now, the reason that it's important to understand that is because all of those adaptations took place over millions of years in an environment that's completely different than the one that exists today. We had nothing but natural foods to eat. We had natural plants, and we had animals that ate plants. Our lives were filled with natural amounts of physical activity that wasn't exercise. It was just related to survival. We didn't have a choice. We did it every day. We were physically active every day because it was a means of survival. We didn't have artificial light. So the environment was not an industrialized modern environment. And so the adaptations that we developed over that course of time enabled us to cope with those conditions. But the conditions are completely different now. We live in an industrialized environment where food is abundant, calories are abundant, processed foods are very calorie dense, artificial light is all around us and that impedes our ability to sleep. Technology has pretty much removed the need for human movement. And so our biology is mismatched with our current environment. And so what happens from that, and the reason it's important to understand this, and this is why I include this as key to success number 1, is I think it's really important to understand why it is that we struggle with managing our health and our wellness, with managing our behaviors. Why do we overeat? Doug, what's up, man? Nice to see you. Why do we overeat? Well, because our biology tells us to overeat when we're in the presence of abundant foods, and that has to do with evolutionary mismatch. Why do we avoid exercise? Well, we avoid exercise because we didn't have the luxury of expending unnecessary calories back in the day. And anything that is not related specifically and directly to immediate survival is considered to be unnecessary. And so our brain kind of nudges us away from exercise if it's not immediately necessary. So we avoid exercise because that's what our biology tells us to do, to save calories, to conserve energy. And why do we eat sugary and fatty foods? Well, because our biology tells us to do that. That would have been a smart thing to do 50,000 years ago when calories were scarce. So it's important to understand evolutionary mismatch. That's key to success number 1, so that you can recognize that this is not a shortcoming in your character. This is not an issue of willpower. This is not a character defect. And then you can redirect the energy that you have been spent beating yourself up for being lazy or having no willpower toward more productive activities. So that's key to success number 1, is understanding the impact of evolutionary mismatch. Key to success number 2 is forgive yourself. You have to forgive yourself when you stumble. In part because, reflecting back on the whole evolutionary mismatch thing, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you want to overeat. It's not your fault that you are attracted to sugary and fatty foods. It's not your fault that you want to avoid exercise. It's not your fault that sleep is difficult. for us because of the artificial light and the artificial environment. It's not your fault that stress is very hard to manage nowadays, because chronic stress is all around us. Chronic stress is what we deal with now, where biologically we adapted to cope with acute stress. So you need to forgive yourself, because you need to understand that all of these challenges are not your fault. It doesn't mean that you get to absolve yourself of responsibility and that you don't have to find a solution to it, but it means that it's not your fault that you're challenged by them. So you need to forgive yourself so that you can expend your energy in more productive ways. Research also shows that if you beat yourself up and make yourself feel bad, if you try to use guilt and shame as motivating forces, it's actually demotivating. The research is pretty clear that it actually compounds the problem and is not productive at all. So you got to show yourself a little compassion. If you screw up and get off track, which we all do, the best thing to do is to not waste any time beating yourself up. The best thing to do is just to get back on track as quickly as you can. The people who are successful are not the people who don't make mistakes. The people who are successful are the ones who just get back on track as quickly as possible. So that's step number 2, or key to success number 2, is forgive yourself. Key to success number 3 is understand the power and the importance of time. We all want everything to happen overnight. We want change to be massive and immediate, but that's simply not the way that behavior change works. That's not the way that physiology and biology work. Everything in this world that is significant requires time. And so you need to understand the importance of tiny incremental improvements compounded over the span of time, or over a span of time. We're not talking about trying to make these huge, significant changes overnight. We're talking about rolling up small, achievable, measurable wins consistently, because that produces self-efficacy, and self-efficacy fuels motivation, and it also fuels confidence. And so aim for these tiny, incremental, step-by-step improvements over time, and understand that it's going to take time it's going to take a long span of time for real change to occur. Hey friend, how are you doing? So understand the power of compounded time too. So just like the power of compound interest, if you take a 1% improvement per week, if you just make a 1% improvement per week in your behavior, and think of what that would mean. What is a 1% improvement in your health and wellness behavior? That could be doing 2 more push-ups than you normally do. That could be taking 1 less bite of a sugary or unhealthy food. It's tiny. It's so tiny that it's just as easy not to do as it is to do. But if you make a 1% improvement each week, which is easy, we can all do that. It's very achievable and attainable. If you make a 1% improvement each week and you compound that out over the span of 52 weeks, I'm not talking about linear growth. I'm talking about compounded growth. That's an improvement of 67% over the span of a 52-week year. So if you improve 1% each week, compounded over the span of 52 weeks, that's a 67% improvement. 67% improvement is pretty good. I would take a 67% improvement in a stock, or in the value of my home. I would take a 67% improvement in my blood pressure or blood sugar measurements. So just understand that making tiny incremental changes over a long or a significant span of time creates massive change. So key to success number 3 is understand the power and the importance of time. Key to success number 4 is manage your environment. You're either going to manage your environment, or your environment's going to manage you. So think of your life as a snow globe, and you're surrounded by the things that you have in your snow globe. What do you want to have in your environment? What do you want to have in your snow globe? What do you have in your snow globe now? Because whatever you have in your environment right now is having an impact on your behavior. It will influence your behavior. We like to think of ourselves as having completely free will, as being impervious to influence from outside sources. But that's just not the case. There's an abundance of research in the field of psychology that shows that we are quite easily influenced by the elements that exist in our environment. So manage your environment, the things that you have in your life, the things that you have in your snow globe. And that includes people, that includes the things, that includes the food, that includes the drink, that includes the activities that you have in your environment. You want to design your environment so that you surround yourself with allies, with people who are supportive of your goals, with food that is consistent with the way that you want to feed your body from a nutrient perspective. There are even suggestions from psychologists saying things like, have a health and wellness magazine out on the coffee table. So it just kind of is a constant reminder of health and wellness. Keep your running shoes by the front door. Keep your workout clothes ready to put on by your bed so that when you get up in the morning, that's the first thing you see, and you put those clothes on and you go and you do some physical activity. Surround your environment with cues that remind you to be healthy. If you don't want to eat unhealthy food, minimize the unhealthy food that you have in your environment. If you have a bunch of processed foods, if you have a bunch of sugary foods, if you have a bunch of Coke and things that you don't want to drink, don't have it in the house. If you have it in the house, you will consume it. I will too. So the smartest thing to do is to minimize the amount of unhealthy food that you have in the house and optimize the cues that you have in your house to remind you to be involved in physical activity. Surround yourself with people who support you in healthy endeavors instead of people who are negative or who try to dissuade you from being healthy. So that's key to success number 4, is make sure you manage your environment, or your environment will manage you. And just think of your life as a snow globe. What do you want to fill your snow globe with? Step number 5 is execute. You have to execute. One of the biggest problems when it comes to health and wellness is not that people don't know what to do, it's that they don't do it. Even if you do something that isn't entirely correct, at least you're doing something, and that gives you some feedback so that you can make adjustments. Trial and error is really important. So this isn't about having the perfect plan in place. It's about pulling the trigger. It's not about perfect, it's about good enough. There's a saying, version 1 is better than version none. And that's true. So a lot of the time people are constantly searching for the best plan of action. What's the best nutrition program? What's the best workout program? What's the best behavior modification program? Yes, that's important. It's important to make sure that you are coming up with the most reasonable, rational, and researched program possible so that when you undertake the actions, they're going to be more likely to produce a result. That's important. But in the end, you have to execute. You have to just do it, even if it means failing. The more frequently you fail, the more opportunity you have to make adjustments and learn. So just be aware of something called the status quo bias. Status quo bias, or in the field of behavioral economics, they call it inertia. And status quo bias is just this reality that we are more likely to continue with behaviors that we've been doing on a regular basis than we are to change, because it's simply easier for us to do. It's just an easier thing for us to do. It requires a lower expenditure of energy for us to keep doing what we've been doing than to change. So execution is key to success number 5. At some point, you just have to take a step. Even if it's a misstep, you're at least moving. And then you can make an assessment as to how that step turned out for you, and you can make an adjustment and make a different step if you need to. But step 5 is you got to pull the trigger and you've got to do something. Don't be that person who is constantly looking for the perfect program and doing nothing. Be the person who is, stumbling and falling over and over and over, because that is the person that's going to eventually learn how to walk. But you've got to be willing to fail, and you've got to be willing to learn from those failures and make adjustments. So trial and error matters. Execute. So again, step number 1 is understand evolutionary mismatch, key to success number 1 is understand evolutionary mismatch and the extent to which it influences your behavior in a modern environment. Key to success number 2 is you got to forgive yourself. When you stumble, when you screw up, and you will, you've got to forgive yourself as quickly as possible and get right back on track as quickly as possible. The people who are successful are not the people who are perfect, because nobody is. It's the people who get right back on track as quickly as possible. Key to success number 3 is understand the power and the importance of time and the importance of tiny incremental improvements compounded over an extended period of time. Key to success number 4 is manage your environment, or your environment will manage you. And that means, make sure that you're surrounding yourself with allies. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who support your objectives and support you in whatever you want to achieve. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with the kind of food and drink that you want to consume. Make sure you surround yourself with cues that remind you to be physically active. So just manage your environment. Imagine that your life is like a snow globe, and you want to be able to control and manage what's in your snow globe. And key to success number 5 is execution. You simply at some point have to pull the trigger and take action. If that action produces a result that is less than satisfying, then make an adjustment. But a lot of people are paralyzed by status quo bias, and they end up trying to find the perfect program, and they never end up taking a step. Be willing to stumble and fall. The people who stumble and fall are the people who learn how to walk. So that's it. I just want to keep it simple and as brief as possible today. Those are the 5 keys to success. Thank you for checking in. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Next week, what I'm going to touch on are what I consider to be the 5 pillars of health. So I'm going to start talking about the 5 pillars from health, and we're just going to keep building upon this every week. Now, we've got a lot of other things that are coming up for you. So we have our weekly 9 a.m. live workouts. Tomorrow, Maddie, who is on right now, hey Maddie, she's going to be talking about burnout and stress and how to deal with that. And that will be at 12 p.m. tomorrow here on the community page. And we got some other things coming up too that are going to be great and informative. So as always, please comment below. Let us know if you have any suggestions, any feedback, any problems, anything that you'd like us to address. We're here to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for your support. But have a great Monday, and we'll talk again soon.